All right. It is time. It is time for episode 11 of In My Room, the podcast parent edition. Hey, I'm so glad that you're here with me today, Clint Johnson, and I appreciate you listening to the parent version of In My Room, the podcast today. If you're in the car, or you're at home, no matter where this podcast finds you, I appreciate you listening today. Help us out by subscribing, sharing this on your favorite social media platform, telling a fellow parent, let them know about this resource that is available to them. Hey, let me talk to you about remembering Jesus in a forgetful world. Now, do it if you're driving right now, where probably where most of you listen to your podcast. If you're driving down the road, be careful doing this. Just raise your hand right now while you're driving down the road if you find that you are forgetful. Yeah, I'm forgetful too. Okay, so moms and dads, hey, you're not the only one. I'm also forgetful. We have a lot going on. Would you say that your teen is probably even more forgetful? Man, I would. Teenagers are forgetful. We asked our teenagers, who do we think were more forgetful, the girls or the boys? And I'll let some of you moms and dads decide who you think probably won the majority on that one. But the truth is that none of us remember everything all the time. No matter who you are, how old you are, some of us have a steel trap for a brain, and we really retain most of the things and don't need to write a lot of things down. You ever go to the restaurant and you have the server, and maybe you're with numerous people, and you're all giving your order, and you get the server who's like, man, yeah, I don't have to write all this down. I can just do it by memory. And in my mind, I'm automatically thinking, there's no way that I can do that. And if you mess up my order, I'm not going to have as much grace for you because you could have just written it down. If I was a server, I would always write it down because I know that my memory is so limited. But the truth is none of us are perfect when it comes to our memory. We all forget things from time to time, some things to do, some things to say. In our last youth service, we talked about remembering Jesus in a forgetful world. In Exodus chapter 14, the Lord delivers the children of Israel out of slavery, out of Egypt. Through Moses, he parts the Red Sea and allows the children of Israel to pass through it unharmed so that they can escape the Egyptians that are racing after them. And just 2 chapters later, those same Israelites who were delivered from slavery, who walked through the middle of the Red Sea, were complaining about not having food to eat. And I want to say to them, don't you remember what God did for you? The water stood up like 2 walls, and you walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. Don't you think that the God who can do that is also capable of giving you food to eat? Just trust him. How on earth can you forget what he just did for you? And then again, I'm also reminded that we do the same sort of thing. God brings us through a trial. He answers a prayer. And within the next few days, is almost completely forgotten. And we're already looking to the next struggle on the horizon, and we find reasons to gripe and complain, just like those same Israelites did in the scriptures. And we have just got to find ways of remembering God's faithfulness. Well, in Joshua chapter 3, we explored this with our students. In Joshua chapter 3, we read of an amazing miracle that God performed for his people. He caused the Jordan River to stop flowing so that they could cross on dry ground. And because our God knows us so very well, God does something amazing for them. It's found in Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. I want to encourage you, but let me just give you the brass tacks Reader's Digest version of it. He says, as you're passing through the Jordan River on the dry ground that I've done for you, I want one from each tribe of Israel to grab a stone and place them on top of each other to let it serve as a memorial for Israel forever. And so that in the future, if your children ask you, Mom, Dad, what are these stones for? Verse 6 and 7, so this may be a sign among you when your children ask later, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall become a memorial for God forever. You see, our God is so gracious to us. He knows that you and I collectively, we have spiritual amnesia. He knows that we are forgetful. And so he gives us memorials. And he commands us to do certain things so that will serve as reminders. And so during our time with our youth, we looked at 5 practical ways, among others, to combat spiritual amnesia. We all fall victim and prone to forgetting the amazing things, just like the Israelites, just like that God does for us, just like he did for the Israelites. And so we looked at some practical ways. And so let me give you those very quickly and give you some next steps for mom and dad that you can follow up with your student and keep that dialogue going. Number 1 is we talked about thinking. What are some events? We just asked them just to start recalling right now. What are some events that you can look back on as a pile of stones marking a defining moment for you? A moment when God showed his power in your life, right? And so we talked about a verse in Psalms. Number 2 was thank. Engage your heart in gratitude for what he has done, right? Psalms 9:1 says, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. We stop right then in the midst of our service and we say, let's thank God right now. It's always appropriate for us to thank God for the thing. We're not going to be like in the New Testament. We're not going to be like the other 9 lepers. We're going to be like the one, and we're going to go back and we're going to say thanks. So that's the second way that we can combat spiritual amnesia, is to think about the things that he's done for us. We're going to thank him. Number 3 is we're going to tell, right? Just as he said, hey, these stones piled on each other will serve not only as a reminder for you, but an opportunity for you to tell your children about God's goodness and faithfulness in your life. We should do the same thing, right? Because of the amazing things that he has done, when he has parted the Red Sea and made the Jordan River dry for our sake and our benefit in our day-to-day life in 2024, we should tell other people. This is what Joshua 4 verses 21 and 22 says. When your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. Number 4 is, I love this one, is traditions, right? As you think about holiday and birthday traditions, all of our families have all kind of different things that we do that is special to us. Consider how you can incorporate ways of telling the stories of God's faithfulness. All right. So maybe at Thanksgiving time, instead of we sing a blessing before we eat and thanking God for that, we take time and maybe just have a time of devotion and say, hey, can we just for a moment just talk about God's goodness and recall some time when he's been so faithful and so good to us. As we want to let this serve as a memorial for what he has done for us. And number 5, and this is something that many of our students like to do, especially I think our girls like to do this a little bit more than our guys, but our guys do as well, and that's transcribe. We encourage them maybe to keep a journal, write out prayer requests, and then record the ways in which God answers those prayers. And when we have those times like we all do of feeling discouraged from time to time, we should look back on those records, look back at that journal, and remember God's faithfulness. And so, mom and dad, as you're listening to the podcast and you kind of get an idea for what we talked about in our most recent youth service, I want to give you an opportunity to go back and ask your student, say, hey, I know you talked about 5 different ways to combat sometimes how we forget the things that God does for us. Which is the one that, and maybe you just kind of recall the ones that were mentioned: think, thank, tell, traditions, and transcribe. Ask them to kind of mention the 1 or 2 that really spoke to them. Ask them how are they going to implement that in their life. And you know that tradition one, that's really one that really requires a partnership. You know, your son or daughter may not be the one that really decides how birthdays go all the time, or how Thanksgiving or Christmas lunch or Christmas dinner goes at your house. So maybe this is an opportunity for you to say, you know, I really noticed that traditions one, that's something that maybe I can help you with? Is that something that you'd be interested in, and us incorporating that in some of our family traditions? What a great way that is. What amazing time that we had. The year for Metro students and our student ministry just here is really flying by. We've had an incredible fall. We've already come out of I Heart Be Him weekend, and God did some incredible things. And we laughed so much. And but just the last night that we had our Saturday night together, we had a powerful time of praying with each other. It was a student testimony night, and that was such an opportunity for our students to talk about God's goodness and faithfulness in the midst of their trials and the things that they really go through as teenagers. We had a special time of prayer just in the altar, our students praying for each other, our leaders praying for our students, and just a beautiful time. And we've seen some fruits from that. Some of our students are wanting to follow the Lord in water baptism in a couple weeks, and so we're so excited to see all the things that God is doing in Metro students. And I would love to hear from you moms and dads about what God has been doing in the life of your student. Well, that's all that, man, it's been an incredible time with all of you today as we talked about remembering Jesus in a forgetful world. I know you're forgetful. I know I'm forgetful. I hope that you won't forget to follow up with your student. I hope that you won't forget to subscribe to your favorite new little podcast. And I look forward to talking to you again on episode 12 of In My Room, the podcast, Parent Edition.
Mm-hmm.